Hello, Professor. I decided to do this module on camera again. I have a lot of trouble writing things down, so I really like this video option. So, talking about the the module this week, we were asked to read, I guess, womanism as portrayed by other authors that aren't, Alice Walker and people that came more from her generation, from her area of thinking. And what I've noticed predominantly amongst like most of the articles, I think all of the articles actually, was that none of them ever quite call themselves womanists. And I thought that was interesting because they were all written after Alice Walker, came up with her definition of womanism. But, and I'm not sure why they didn't call themselves that. They just didn't know about it, didn't think they could embrace it. But none of them ever did. And so, but they definitely did portray different areas of the definition of womanism, like through their writing, and then they also added to it in their own way as well. Like starting with the bridge called my back and the different articles you had us read by women of color. I liked Gloria Anzaldua's piece because not necessarily what she said, because it was more of a preface, but I mean, she always says things that are great. More because of the fact that she did it in two languages, and that's definitely already showing a tenet of womanism by incorporating not only English, like the language of the oppressor, but also incorporating Spanish, because those are her people, those are the women that she's trying to reach. And so I really enjoyed that article, I think more than any of the other ones, and it wasn't even really an article, it was just a forward, essentially. What really, I guess, resounded in me right from the get-go, because that was the first article I read, and the forward is the first thing I read, is the fact is when she says, basta de gritar contra el viento. Toda palabra es ruido si no está acompañada de acción. Because although I agree with womanism a lot, and I almost define myself as a womanist, I almost feel like Alice Walker's definition lacked a call to action. Not in the way that one would typically think. Obviously, she, wanted action through, loving each other, through accepting one another as women of color, through accepting each other, for our spirituality, for our faults, for any way we looked, whether it was skinny or thin, or, what have you. But she never really made like a call to action to make change, and to get the tenets of womanism out there. At least not in her original tenets. Obviously, Alice Walker throughout her whole life advocated for action and for change, but in her definitions in Searching for Mother's Gardens, I didn't feel it. She didn't explicitly say it, and Gloria Anzaldúa did, and so I really, right off the bat, that really got to me, because I'm never a person to talk about these issues. I'm always about enacting change and making things happen because of them, or to change whatever it is that we're discussing. And then another quote from her: "No nos podemos quedar paradas con los brazos cruzados en medio del puente." That just rings true for me as a woman of color, just because you can't, as a woman of color, who lives in this country, essentially, you can't, and who lives in the global south, because we've been so colonized at this point that our interactions, we interact with English-speaking people, the oppressors, all the time. But essentially, we can't afford to stop in the middle of the bridge with our arms crossed. It means we can't stand still in between these two worlds, between these two clashing identities, because it's just not possible. We can't afford to do it. It's not a thing that we have the privilege to be able to do, as women of color, again, who live in this country. So I really like that she phrased that she said that, because that's a feeling that I often have, like, of being on that bridge between the two worlds, and feeling like I want to stop and just stand there and cross my arms, but just not, you can't. And she's just kind of saying that and further reminding me that that's not what I can do, that I have to keep moving forward or keep my foot in both sides. So I really like that. And I think that's what she adds to this. That's one of the new things she adds to womanism, is a call to action, a call not to stand still, to partake in the world, even if it feels like you don't want to. And so that's one of the new things she introduced. Something that I really liked from, Leah Lakshmi Kepna Samra Singha. I'm not sure how you say her name, but I liked her, how she talked about safe spaces and about trying to create your own family when your biological family doesn't, fulfill your needs, I guess. It doesn't make you feel comfortable. But I also liked how she was very critical of that and critical of herself for wanting to start this new family. Like in womanism. Womanism often talks about creating your circles and your safe spaces and loving one another as women of color because you are women of color and you should appreciate each other because of it. And she talks about that. She talks about wanting that. But she also talks about the fact that, as she puts it, where was it? I'm sorry. When your strongest point of unity is that you all hate the same people, you've got problems. Coming together, what was it? There was another quote. Something along the lines of, if just being women of color doesn't create a perfect utopia. It doesn't create a perfect safe space. There are no safe spaces. You have to keep going and keep living in a world where you're aware of the fact that you're going to be uncomfortable no matter where you are, no matter what you look like. And even if you're in a group of people who you think you have something in common with, everybody has their own unique identities, and living and, being a part of the world is being uncomfortable, often in these circles, and moving through it and moving past it, not necessarily past it, but through it, just moving through it, getting through it, talking through it, discussing it, unpacking it, unpacking it. And so I really like that she mentioned that, and just was very critical of the fact that not Alice's Walker definition of womanism, of us coming together because we're women of color, just doesn't always make sense, because if that's all we share in common, if that's all we have, it isn't enough. You need to have different connections on different levels, because not all women of color share the same experience. And so that's, I guess, a new voice that she added to a new concern of womanism, that POC, women safe spaces just they're not possible. Not if all you're looking for is just other women of color. And so I really like that, because I was critical of that as well when it came to Alice Walker's original concepts. Another article that we read was by Alma Saeed, and I really liked her. When she practiced womanism in a very completely not what's the word, conventional way, because from the very beginning she said that she wasn't ever really thinking about this higher, gender theory when she was growing up, when she was combating these different stereotypes against her body. She was just what's the other thing? she did not possess the tools to analyze or understand the reaction to this process of social conditioning and normalization until many years later. Um, and I guess that's how we always are in a way. Like, even when we go to school, read this, gender theory, this feminist theory, we can't always understand what we're combating, what we're fighting against, like, until it happens. Like, we won't be able to put words to it or understand the kind of resistance that we're putting up until that moment happens, until we're putting up the resistance. And so, and I think womanism, I almost think that's very much womanism, just in its basic essence, is that you don't necessarily focus on the theoretical way of thinking about this stuff. You just focus on living your life, whether that includes actively rebelling against these gendered stereotypes. Is that's it. That's womanism, whether you call yourself a womanist or not. And so I think the one thing she did add, just presenting a different viewpoint of it, presenting a different viewpoint of being a womanist. How you don't necessarily have to be feminine and love feminine things, not necessarily traditionally feminine things, to be a womanist. Because she said she was a tomboy, she was into sports, and that still made her feminine in her way, even though she was like practicing these masculine things, it still made her feminine. And so I guess that's a new thing she brings to womanism, is that you can be, I guess, butch and not into, feminine things, and still be very much love women and love being a woman and love just being a part of that world. So I love that she contributed to that, definitely. And then the last article, Love Feminism, But Where's My Hip Hop, by Gwendolyn Poe. I want to say Poe. She talked about something that I guess hits home for a lot of women of color, and just women in general, and what it means to interact with pop culture and with media that is like actively working against you as like a feminist or womanist. I think she did call herself a womanist at some point, or it might have been third wave feminism, but I just like that she embodied the essence of womanism, but in her own way. That she loved women and she wanted to celebrate women, but she did it by finding a way to celebrate women within the world of hip hop, which is stereotypically seen as a masculine world, as a male world. But she, from the very beginning, saw how women were appreciated in it in a way, or were not appreciated in it, but how they could use it to use it to get themselves appreciated and known and their viewpoints out there. And I thought that was awesome because womanism, I guess, is very much rooted in just interacting in everyday life and being a woman in everyday life. And so hip hop, is a part of a lot of women's everyday life, listening to it, loving it. It's like a media that you like. And so just like there are ways to shape your black feminist identity, your black womanist identity, your brown, or whatever other color, yellow, red, through these mediums. Even if they seem like you can't, you can. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to talk about it by critiquing these mediums, these songs, these movies. By critiquing them, you can find your own way, and find your own identity by doing that. But it's still enjoying the music and still enjoying the pop culture. So I really enjoyed that. And she brought that new voice in the sense that you can find you can celebrate women no matter where you are or what medium you're using. A lot of new themes that emerged is working within just pop culture. Within, by these women of color, a lot of their themes were using music, writing, to get out their way of thinking. And I guess it was new in the sense that it just wasn't a thing in Alice Walker's time. The internet and blogs and hip hop music. Um, but womanists now are adapting to the current environment, and they're using new mediums of getting out, what they feel, what they think. So that was new, definitely. New themes emerged. Uh, some themes that remain consistent, actually, were just the love of women and celebrating women for who they are, and not necessarily wanting to change culture, like somebody's culture, in order for them to be a good feminist or a womanist, but celebrating them for what they are, for who they are, and then being a womanist by being that. Which that theme remains consistent. Alice Walker said, you know, that like you had to love like women for being women, for what they were, for what they look like. That's how you love them, and that was part of womanism. And that is how a lot of these articles play out. A lot of the women are who they are unapologetically, and they talk about how other forces, other feminists want them to change to suit, I guess, the feminist definition, but they never did, and that was a theme that was very consistent, I think. But again, new themes emerging being that they're doing it in different ways than Alice Walker never thought about, or maybe not necessarily agrees with. So I really enjoyed that aspect, that we got to see different ways of, I guess, practicing womanism, practicing feminism that we haven't seen before in this class. So I really like that. The way that women of color can form political solidarity but still retain our differences is by not tolerating, but acknowledging differences, loving differences, understanding that that's a part of coming together, of forming political solidarity. That yes, it's going to make you uncomfortable, especially if you're a white woman. Political solidarity is going to make you uncomfortable. So it's going to make you feel things and it's going to make you realize your own internalized, oppression and how racist and sexist you might be sometimes. And as much as you don't want to realize that is going to be a big step in forming political solidarity with women of color. Realizing that you oppress women as much as other people do, as much as men do, as much as, people who are proud of their sexism or racism do. And you just don't want to know about it. Like, you just don't want to acknowledge it. So, you shut down women of color or when they speak because you're afraid that they're going to reveal something about yourself that you didn't want to really realize. But you're going to have to realize it. We're going to have to all march through the murky depths together. We're going to have to cross that bridge to the other side together to really form political solidarity. And that's it. That's how women of color have to form solidarity. We can't just look at each other and say, hey, we're all not white. Let's be best friends. That's not how it works. We're going to have to understand that we've all participated in oppression in some way or another, and we're gonna have to get past that. Because as what happened to Leah in her story, she doesn't want to have that one moment where somebody in her circle says something fucked up, and then that's it. Like, that ruins a friendship forever. She doesn't want that. So from the very beginning, you have to get that out there. You have to have those conversations so that they don't surprise you and stab you in the back later on. And that's the only way to really form political solidarity and retain our differences, by acknowledging that we're different, acknowledging that we have different lives, different identities, we grew up differently, and that might have resulted in different internalized, racism, internalized sexism, internalized forms of oppression, and how we exert that on other people. I would revise my definition of womanism. I mean, briefly, I guess for me, it was always very general. I said that I think womanism is about loving women and enjoying women for who they are. And I think it's still very much true. The only way I would revise it is that sometimes you don't have to love what they say or do, but you can still love them for, as women. And that you can't expect them to be simply because you match a color tone. And I guess that's how I would change it, is that you have to be aware that we are always fighting. We're always figuring things out and learning and growing. And so, yes, womanism is about loving each other as women for who we are, but we don't necessarily, and accepting who we are. We don't necessarily be happy about it. And we can always have those conversations and change and grow. And we always have to be doing that, I guess. And sometimes you can lose that love for women and still be a womanist and still and they will still be a womanist, but you will lose that love and you will have to work through it for it to come back. um, so I guess that's how I might change it, is just accepting that, yeah, we have to love each other and we're perfect the way we are, but that definition of perfection can change as we change, and it should, as we change, and we should change, and we can still remain perfect even throughout the entire change, because we're changing, and that's part of being perfect, is the ability to change. But I think that's about it for now. I've been talking for 21 minutes, so yeah. I used throughout the video, I talked about the articles "Love Feminism, but Where's My Hip Hop" by Gwendolyn D. Poe. I talked about the article "Chapals and Gym Shorts" by Amla Saeed. I mentioned the article "Brown Girl World" by Leah Lakshmi Kepsna Samraisina. I'm sorry, I'm butchering that name. And then "The Bridge Called My Back," Writings by Radical Women of Color by Cherry Moraga, Gloria Zaldua, and then the specific articles by Cherry Moraga, Naomi Little Bear, Rosario Morales, and last but not least, Judith Moshkovich. And so, yeah, I mean, I hoped I answered all the questions correctly. Thank you.